Look, I don't care what her file says. That's an Air Force combat controller. She pushes buttons and calls in jets from an air-conditioned tent. This is a SEAL sniper course. She doesn't belong on this bridge. The crowd of operators, a hardened mix of SEALs and Green Berets, chuckled nervously at Gunnery Sergeant Rourke's pronouncement. He stood with his hands on his hips, a bulldog of a man whose confidence was carved from 2 decades of kicking indoors. His gaze fell upon the lone figure at the far end of the concrete bridge, a woman so still she seemed part of the architecture. She said nothing. She offered no defense, no glance of defiance. Her focus was entirely on the rifle in front of her, an older, heavily customized M210 that looked more like a relic than a weapon of war. But when the exercise commander, Colonel Vance, watching from the command post through a pair of powerful binoculars, saw the way her left hand cradled the stock, a forgotten memory stirred in his mind, a whisper of a call sign he hadn't heard in years. If you believe that true respect is earned in the silence of perfect execution, not shouted in the noise of arrogance, type competence below. The woman on the bridge, Staff Sergeant Anya Sharma, continued her work, oblivious to the drama her presence had created. She was an anomaly in this sea of testosterone and tribalism, her Air Force uniform a stark blue against the dusty greens and tans of the Army and Navy Special Operators. Rourke made sure everyone knew it. He saw her smaller frame, her quiet demeanor, and his mind, clouded by ingrained prejudice, filled in the blanks with assumptions of weakness. He saw a support asset, a technician, someone who played a part in the war but never truly faced its sharpest edge. He did not see the calloused pads on her fingertips, worn smooth from thousands of hours of contact with metal and trigger. He did not see the subtle, almost imperceptible way her eyes tracked the movement of heat shimmer rising from the valley floor, reading the invisible rivers of air as if they were printed on a map. He saw a woman from the chair force, and that was all the data he required. The silence from her end of the bridge was his confirmation. In his world, strength was loud. It was boisterous, it was challenging, it was proven in verbal spars long before the first round was fired. Her calm was, to him, an admission of inadequacy. The other operators took their cue from him. They shuffled their feet, they exchanged smirks, they kept their distance. They were a pack, and Rourke was their alpha. To challenge his assessment would be to challenge him, and no one was willing to do that over a quiet Air Force sergeant who seemed content to be ignored. Sharma's world had shrunk to the space between her eye and the reticle of her scope. The murmurs and laughter were just background radiation, irrelevant data points in a complex firing solution. Her movements were a study in practiced economy. Each action flowed into the next with a liquid grace that belied the rigid discipline behind it. She adjusted the parallax, her fingers moving with the delicate precision of a watchmaker. She unsealed a small, waterproof case and withdrew a Kestrel wind meter, holding it aloft for a moment not to get a reading, but to confirm what her senses were already telling her about the fickle cross breeze funneling through the canyon. She made a minute adjustment to her elevation turret, the clicks barely audible, more a feeling in her fingertips than a sound. It was a ritual of competence, a silent prayer to the gods of ballistics. Rourke, growing impatient with the lack of reaction, swaggered closer. "Hey, Air Force," he barked, his voice laced with condescending authority. "You do know which end the bullet comes out of, right? Or do they cover that in PowerPoint?" A fresh wave of snickers rippled through the audience. Sharma didn't flinch. She simply finished her preparations, placed the butt of the rifle firmly into the pocket of her shoulder, and exhaled slowly, her breath misting for a fraction of a second in the cool morning air. Her response was not in words, but in the absolute, unshakable stillness that settled over her. It was a silence more profound and more challenging than any shouted retort. It was the calm of the professional, a state of being so alien to Rourke's bluster that it only irritated him further. He saw meekness where there was mastery. He saw fear where there was focus. His assumptions were a wall between him and the truth, a wall that was about to be shattered by a single, perfectly placed round. The exercise scenario was a nightmare by design. Far downrange, at a staggering 1,877 meters, a simulated hostage situation was staged. The target was a steel plate, precisely 10 inches wide, representing the kill zone on a tango holding a hostage. It was partially obscured by a fluttering flag, meant to simulate unpredictable movement and visual obstruction. To make matters worse, the canyon winds were a sniper's hell, swirling in contradictory patterns, a chaotic mix of updrafts and downdrafts. It was a shot designed to separate the masters from the merely skilled. Rourke's hand-picked SEAL sniper, a young, confident operator named Miller, went first. He was good, a product of the best training in the world. He spent 10 minutes calculating, his spotter calling out wind adjustments, his every action broadcast with the loud confidence of his tribe. "Sending it," he yelled, and the sharp crack of his 338 Lapua Magnum echoed through the valley. A puff of dust erupted from the dirt berm a full 3 feet to the left of the target. A miss. A clean miss. Rourke clapped him on the shoulder. "Tough wind. Damn near impossible shot," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, framing the failure as a testament to the difficulty, not a lack of skill. Then, his eyes found Sharma. A cruel smile played on his lips. "All right, Air Force. Your turn. Show us how it's done." The invitation was pure mockery. He was handing her an impossible task, so he could ridicule her inevitable failure. The operators fell silent, the air thick with anticipation for the coming humiliation. Sharma simply nodded. Understood, the word was spoken so softly, it was almost carried away by the wind. She settled behind her rifle, her body becoming one with the weapon and the concrete beneath her. She didn't rush. She didn't seem to calculate. She just watched. She watched the distant flag, not as an obstruction, but as an indicator. She watched the dance of the heat haze. She watched the slow drift of a single eagle circling high above the canyon. He saw the wind. She felt it. He saw the distance. She owned it. Her preparation was a stark contrast to the SEALs. There was no loud chatter with the spotter, no dramatic pronouncements. There was only the rhythmic, steady rise and fall of her chest. She was in a bubble of pure concentration, a world where the only things that existed were her rifle, and a single point of impact over a mile away. Her left eye closed, her right eye staring through the glass, seeing not just a target, but a complex tapestry of environmental data. The other saw a woman preparing to shoot. Colonel Vance, still watching through his binoculars, saw something else entirely. He saw a predator. He saw the absolute economy of motion, the total lack of wasted energy, the supreme confidence that emanates not from ego but from countless repetitions. He had seen that stillness before, in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the deserts of Iraq, in the eyes of the quietest, most lethal operators he had ever known. Rourke was growing bored, his arms crossed, tapping his foot. Any day now, Sergeant Sharma ignored him. Her finger rested on the trigger. She wasn't waiting for the wind to die down. She was waiting for a specific moment, a seam in the chaos, a brief, half-second window of relative stability she had sensed was coming. It was an instinct born from a talent so profound it bordered on supernatural. Then it came. The flag downrange went limp for a single, breathtaking moment. The heat shimmer straightened. The eagle overhead held its position. In that infinitesimal slice of time, she broke the shot. The crack of her rifle was different. It wasn't the loud boom of the 338. It was a sharper, more piercing report. The rifle barely moved, perfectly managed by her form. For a full 5 seconds, there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Then, from the radio of the range controller standing near Vance, a voice crackled, laced with pure astonishment. "Hit. Repeat. We have a direct hit. Center mass." The bullet went through the flagpole's grommet. A wave of disbelief washed over the bridge. It was followed by a silence so complete, so deafening, that it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Every eye was on Sharma. She was already pulling back from the scope, her expression unchanged, her movements calm and methodical as she cleared the weapon. Rourke's jaw was slack, his face a mask of stunned confusion. He stammered, "No. No way. That's impossible." Colonel Vance lowered his binoculars, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. He keyed his radio. "Range control, confirm that last transmission." The voice came back, still shaky. "Confirmed, sir." The round passed through the upper brass grommet of the flag before striking the target dead center. We've never seen anything like it." Vance clicked off the radio and began walking down the bridge, his boots crunching on the gravel with deliberate, rhythmic authority. The crowd of operators parted for him like the sea, their earlier arrogance replaced by a mixture of awe and confusion. They were all looking between the impossibly distant target and the small, quiet woman who was now methodically cleaning her rifle, as if she had done nothing more remarkable than swatting a fly. Rourke was frozen in place, his mind struggling to process the event. It wasn't just a hit. It was a miracle of physics and skill, a shot that defied probability. It was a one-in-a-million event that couldn't be luck. Luck didn't thread a needle at over a mile. That was mastery. That was something else entirely. As Vance approached, Rourke finally found his voice, though it was hollowed of its earlier bravado. "Sir, that had to be a fluke. A lucky shot." Vance didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed on Sharma. He stopped a few feet away from her, his gaze falling on the worn stock of her M210. He saw a small, faded carving near the trigger guard, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. A wolf's head with a Roman numeral 7 beneath it. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "That wasn't luck, Gunnery Sergeant," Vance said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute command. He pulled a ruggedized tablet from his vest and tapped the screen a few times, his expression grim. "That was a legacy." He turned the screen towards Rourke, who flinched as if struck. On the screen was Sharma's personnel file. Most of it was a sea of black redactions, entire paragraphs and mission histories hidden behind the impenetrable wall of classification. But a few lines were visible, and they were enough to drain the blood from Rourke's face. He read the words, his lips moving silently, each one a hammer blow to his ego. Unit, 24th Special Tactics Squadron. Combat deployments, 7, details classified. Special skills, Advanced Sniper/Reconnaissance, Tier 1. Medals, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Air Force Cross. And then, at the very bottom, next to her official designation, was a single, terrifyingly familiar line. Call sign, Wolf 7. Rourke looked up from the tablet, his eyes wide with a dawning horror and a profound, sickening sense of shame. Wolf 7 wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend, a ghost story whispered in hushed tones in the forward operating bases of the Special Operations community. It was the designation for the lead sniper of a ghost unit, a figure credited with some of the most critical and difficult shots of the entire war. The call sign was passed down from one master to the next, a lineage of silent professionals whose identities were one of the most closely guarded secrets in the military. Wolf 7 was supposed to be a myth, a boogeyman, and he had just spent the morning mocking her. Vance looked from Rourke's pale face to Sharma, who had finished cleaning her weapon and was now watching them with a neutral expression. The colonel, a man who had commanded battalions in combat and rarely showed deference to anyone, slowly raised his hand to his brow and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. "Sergeant Sharma," he said, his voice ringing with a respect so deep it was almost reverent. "My apologies for my gunnery sergeant's lack of professional courtesy. It won't happen again." Sharma simply looked at the colonel, held his gaze for a moment, and gave a slight, acknowledging nod. "No apology necessary, sir." Her quiet confidence needed no validation, her competence no applause. The salute from the colonel was more than enough. The lesson had been delivered. The story of the shot on the bridge spread through the Special Operations community like a shockwave. It traveled not through official channels, but through the shadow network of encrypted texts, quiet phone calls, and hushed conversations in smoke pits and chow halls from Fort Bragg to Coronado. The narrative was always the same. A cocky SEAL instructor, a quiet Air Force sergeant, and a single, impossible shot that had redefined the meaning of the word expert. The tale became a parable, a cautionary lesson about the danger of assumptions. The operators who had laughed at Rourke's jokes now spoke of Sergeant Sharma with a kind of mythic reverence. They analyzed the physics of the shot. They debated the make of her rifle. They whispered the call sign Wolf 7, as if it were a holy name. They had witnessed the humbling of an ego, but more importantly, they had witnessed the quiet, undeniable power of true competence. Rourke was a changed man. The event had stripped him of his bluster, leaving behind a raw, humbled core. A few days later, he found Sharma on the range, long after everyone else had left for the day, practicing wind calls with her kestrel. He approached not with a swagger, but with the hesitant steps of a student. He didn't offer a clumsy apology. He knew words were insufficient. Instead, He stood there for a long moment before finally speaking, his voice quiet and stripped of all arrogance. "Sergeant, how did you know? The wind. How did you know it was going to calm?" Sharma lowered her wind meter and looked at him. She saw not the arrogant gatekeeper from the bridge, but a man genuinely seeking to understand. She didn't give him a long speech about training or instinct. She simply tapped the side of her head. "You don't just watch the wind," she said, her voice even in calm. "You have to listen to it. The valley has a rhythm. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." She then held out a small, waterproof notebook filled with handwritten charts, diagrams, and complex ballistic calculations. "This is the data for this valley. Every temperature, every humidity level, every wind direction. I've been out here every morning for a week at 0500, building the profile." The shot wasn't luck. It was math. Rourke took the notebook as if it were a sacred text, his fingers tracing the neat, precise handwriting. It was a book of secrets, a testament to a level of discipline and dedication he had failed to see. It was the work of a true professional. The legend of Wolf 7 only grew from there. The concrete bridge where she took the shot was unofficially christened Wolf's Perch. New SEAL sniper trainees were brought there not just to practice long-range shooting, but to hear the story. The instructors, Rourke included, used it as a mandatory lesson on inter-service cooperation and the folly of judging a warrior by their uniform, their gender, or their demeanor. The story became a tool, a way to forge a new generation of operators who understood that the most dangerous person in the room is often the quietest. The M210 rifle, once seen as a relic, became an object of immense curiosity. It was a symbol of her philosophy, that the skill of the operator, not the newness of the gear, was what truly mattered. It represented a legacy of precision, a direct connection to the masters who had carried the Wolf 7 call sign before her. A photograph taken by one of the range controllers that day, a grainy image of Sharma looking through her scope, was printed out and pinned to the main bulletin board in the SOCOM training center. There was no caption, no explanation needed. Everyone knew what it represented. It was a silent reminder that competence is the only currency that matters. Sharma herself, of course, wanted none of it. She completed the training exercise, her performance flawless and understated, and then she was gone, moved on to the next classified location, the next mission that the world would never hear about. She left behind nothing but a single, perfect hole in a steel target and a legend that would echo for years. She hadn't sought recognition or respect. She had simply done her job to the highest possible standard, and the respect had followed as a natural consequence. She proved that a legacy isn't built on loud proclamations, but on the silent, steady accumulation of excellent work. Her actions had created a ripple effect, changing minds, altering training doctrines, and inspiring a new level of professional humility. It was the triumph of the quiet professional. Months later, a new class of Green Beret candidates was on a range, struggling with long-distance wind calls. Their instructor, a seasoned sergeant major, saw their frustration. He called a halt to the training and gathered the young soldiers around. He didn't yell at them or call them failures. Instead, he pointed to a distant concrete bridge, shimmering in the afternoon heat. "You see that bridge?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "They call that Wolf's Perch. Let me tell you a story about why." He recounted the tale of Sergeant Sharma, of the arrogant SEAL, and of the impossible shot. He spoke of her silence, her focus, her absolute professionalism in the face of mockery. He told them how she had spent a week sleeping less just to collect atmospheric data, how she knew the valley's secrets better than the men who trained there every day. He wasn't just telling a war story. He was teaching a fundamental lesson. He was teaching them that true strength isn't about the patch on your shoulder or the volume of your voice. It's about the depth of your preparation and the flawless nature of your execution. He was teaching them that respect is a byproduct of competence. The young soldiers listened, their expressions rapt. The story was already part of the institutional folklore, a foundational myth for a new era of joint operations. Sharma's single act of quiet competence had become a permanent part of the curriculum, a standard against which they would all be measured. Her silence had become a roar that echoed across the entire special operations community, a permanent testament to the fact that actions will always, always speak louder than words. True legacy isn't something you proclaim. It's something you build, one silent, perfect action at a time. It's not about the stories they tell about you when you're there to hear them, but the lessons they teach using your example long after you are gone. The real impact of that day wasn't measured in the awe of the operators or the shame of a single instructor. It was measured in the subtle shifts that followed. It was in the way a Green Beret captain would now actively seek input from an Air Force TCP on his team, not as a support asset, but as a fellow warrior. It was in the way a new generation of SEALs learned to look for the quiet ones, to recognize the stillness of a true expert as a sign of danger, not weakness. The legend of Wolf 7 became a catalyst for a deeper, more genuine form of inter-service respect, one forged not in a top-down directive from a general, but in the undeniable proof of one sergeant's profound skill. Anya Sharma never heard these stories. She was thousands of miles away, lying on a cold rooftop in a forgotten corner of the world, her eye pressed to the same scope, listening to the rhythm of a new city, a new wind. She was unaware that her name had become a teaching tool, that her actions had become a parable, and she wouldn't have cared. The external validation was irrelevant. The work was all that mattered. The quiet, methodical pursuit of perfection was its own reward. The legacy she was building wasn't for the history books or the bulletin boards. It was in the lives she saved with her precision, in the missions she made possible through her silent vigilance. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that the world is full of assumptions, of loud voices demanding attention, of superficial judgments based on prejudice and ignorance. But beneath that noise, competence is always at work. It is quiet, it is disciplined, and it is patient. It does not need to announce its presence. It waits for its moment, and when that moment comes, it performs with a clarity and precision that silences all doubt. It proves that what you are is infinitely more important than what people assume you to be. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.